Greetings all. Is this working? I am Torical Scribeson. I am communicating to, whoever might be listening on an orb of witness. It's a magical device designed by my gnome brethren for recording purposes. I'm starting my records on the 12th of the month of Gear in the year of 685 PFW, post-Flapjack Wars. I'm sure you are all curious as to what my project is about. Well, all in good time. I will start by introducing myself. As I have said, I am Torical Scribeson. My family's history deals in, well, history. Sorry for my nervousness. I'm new to this. Anyway, I was always interested in the tales of daring do and romance and what have you. And my interests were more the fictitious histories, if you will, or as my family would call it, trivialities. So I did my studies in secret. I had read all the gnomish tales, and although I'm proud of my heritage, I was left a little, well, bored. I craved more knowledge about the world outside of Boom-Vroomberg. I searched through our libraries for tales of other cultures, but alas, we had very little. You see, my people are very keep-to-themselves sort, which makes my endeavors more complicated. One of my issues is, well, my nation doesn't like gnomes leaving the city unless it is for trade or some endeavor for our nation. And although my project is what I would say for the whole of Pairodie, as well as my nation, I doubt they will see things my way and allow me my departure. So, I'm going to check into an alternative route. More on that later. Toodaloo. Greetings all. Torical again. Today is the 15th of the month of Gear of the year of 685 PFW. Sorry I am so quiet. I'm making my way to the Flybox Bay. I've packed all my things and prepared for my excursion. Just let me find the right flybox. The flyboxes are interesting means of travel. Essentially, they are boxes with wings fitted into giant slingshots. Crude, but I imagine effective. Ah, this will do. There we go. Now.
Here! What are you doing there?
Oh dear, I seem to have been caught. One moment.
Hello, good sir. How may I assist you?
You can assist me by getting out of the flybox, sir.
Oh, well...
Stop shouting!
Oh, sorry. Anyway, I'm not quite sure how to get out of the flybox.
What?
Well, it's embarrassing, but I got in here easy enough, but I'm not quite sure how to get out. How about this lever?
Wait! Don't! Stop!
Greetings all, Torical Scribeson here. It is, to be honest, I don't know what day it is. I've been flying for some time now. I seem to have made a miscalculation, well, a few miscalculations. One, I did not learn to pilot this particular transport. Two, in learning that I did not know how to pilot, I also learned that I did not know how to land. I fear this is my final entry as I see some trees getting closer. I hope that someone will take up my mission and...
Surprisingly, I had survived my landing. I found myself in a forest. I looked for my flybox, no share vehicle, and was sad to see it in pieces. But it was a one-way trip sort of vehicle. I made my way through the forest. As I trekked through the forest for I can't remember how long, I eventually found my way into a town. It was full of humans. You could find humans everywhere. They lived like bugs in that fashion. Not that that's a bad thing. My people had done business with them in what we call tolerance towns. Those are places for trade near the foot of our mountain. It was a place for us to trade and meet with other races in a controlled manner. Anyway, ancient races aside, I needed to find where I was. I had traveled and asked around only to have my fears realized. I was in a town in the country of Norm. Mind you, Norm was not a dangerous country. Far from it. That's why it worried me so. I had landed in the most boring country in Pairodie. After traveling through the town all day, night had finally fallen, and not only was I disappointed where my journey had taken me, the night had brought freezing cold wind. I had to find shelter, and soon. I had found an alley and a few discarded, moth-eaten blankets for my bed. I was about to turn in when I was found by a large, burly, bearded man. He was accusing me of stealing his discarded blankets. I thought that I was in serious trouble. After a heated discussion, the large human, whose name I learned was Oliver, and I came to an understanding. He was a blacksmith who, between you and I, was not very good at his profession. Complained about business troubles, for the reason I mentioned, no doubt. And he took his woes out on me. Upon further discussion, not so heated, I learned that Oliver did have a tale to tell, provided I could help him build a more efficient forge. I felt it was a good deal, so we shook on it. Oliver was shocked by how quickly I had fixed his forge. It was adorable to see him so impressed by something so simple, but I digress. In his thanks, he provided me room and board, as well as an interesting tale. A carriage rode down a path towards the town of Todd. Inside was Lady Lisa and her brother, Lord Robert. Robert looked at his sister, who seemed rather displeased.
What is the matter, dear sister?
Lisa glared at her brother.
Do you have to ask?
Come now, Lisa. She's not that bad.
She's always that bad.
Robert shrugged.
Well, someone shouldn't have snuck out of the house in her finest dress for a wrestling match with a common boy and some bramble bushes. I mean, honestly, sister, you could have some more respect for yourself. You could have at least procured a room at an inn.
Lisa sneered at her brother.
Is that where you have wrestling matches with common boys?
Robert sneered back at his sister. Meanwhile, as the affluent siblings bickered on their carriage ride, Thag and his goblin band were readying their roadside heist. His forces, basically 6 other goblins, found their hiding spots behind rocks and in trees. Thag and his second-in-command, Salik, hid behind their own rock, ready to attack.
Are you sure about this path, Thag?
We have been thieves for our whole lives, Salik. We cannot turn back now.
Salik rolled his eyes.
I'm talking about this path we are hiding around.
Oh, right. Most people travel down the main path, right?
Salik nodded as he gave Thag a look of doubt.
Yes, which begs the question. Why are we here instead of there? I mean, that's where all the commerce is.
Thag smiled at his second-in-command.
Exactly. So there are bound to be those who get sick of all the traffic in and out of town. They will take the not-so-beaten They will come down our path thinking it's safe, and then...
Thag slammed his fist into the open palm of his other hand.
BAM! That's when we strike. They'll never expect it.
Thag pointed to his head with a big smile on his face.
Do you get my brilliance?
Salak stared at Thag for a moment, then proceeded to shake his head.
No.
Thag sneered.
Just wait and see.
Noble sibling's carriage had stopped in front of a run-down-looking building that had a sign that read Gertrude's Tailoring. Lisa stared at the little shop in fear.
You know, I don't think I need my dress repaired that badly.
Robert glared at his sister.
So the sooner we go in, the sooner we can leave.
Fine, let's get this over with.
Lisa stomped into the store.
Huh. That's the spirit?
Robert followed his sister into the shop. The goblin band continued to wait. Salak gave Thag a glare.
You'll see any minute now.
Salak nodded, rolled his eyes, and continued his watch. Robert and Lisa stood in the little shop. Lisa wanted to maintain her rage, but she was distracted by the beautiful dresses.
How does she make such beautiful dresses being a...
Being a what?
Lisa was surprised to find Gertrude standing before her. Gertrude was a rather rotund woman with stringy blonde hair that looked like wet hay, dull brown eyes, and a face with several warts. Gertrude stared at Lisa, waiting for an answer.
Oh, Gertrude, hi.
Thag and his goblins continued to wait. Salak was the only one not facing the road. He was glaring at Thag. Thag side-eyed his second-in-command.
They're coming!
Salak rolled his eyes. Gertrude glared at the noble siblings.
Well, what do you want?
I was curious if you could do some repairs for me.
Did you tear it up with one of your romps with the local boys?
Lisa lunged for Gertrude.
You bitch!
How much would fixing her dress cost?
Robert stepped between his sister and Gertrude to prevent a situation. Considering Gertrude was a heftier woman, Lisa would not have fared well. Gertrude stared at Robert. Robert grew nervous in the silence.
Well, can you help us?
Where is the dress?
Robert pointed a thumb over his shoulder.
It's in the carriage.
Gertrude sneered at Robert.
Why didn't you bring the dress into the shop?
Robert looked confused.
I didn't know if you could repair it.
Gertrude rolled her eyes.
How do I know if I can repair it if I don't see it?
I will go get it.
Gertrude sneered and nodded.
Good. You're learning.
Robert stared at Gertrude with rage in his eyes. Gertrude was unfazed. Robert stomped off feeling defeated. The sun was going down as the goblin horde continued to wait. Thag looked over at a goblin hiding behind a rock. This goblin was Fezzik, and he was sleeping.
Fezzik, wake up!
Fezzik awoke and looked at his leader with sleepy eyes. Thag glared at the goblin in fury.
Stay alert!
Yes, you need to be ready for the nobody coming down this road.
Thag glared at his second-in-command.
You know, patience is a virtue.
Apparently one that doesn't pay.
Gertrude examined Lisa's torn-up dress as the noble siblings watched her in uncomfortable silence.
Well,
When do you need this?
a week?
Gertrude shot an angry glance at Lisa.
Is it...
400 gold.
How much?
This is a noble's dress, so I have a lot of materials I have to find. That's 100 gold. I have to keep it covert, so I will have to find these materials in the dark. That's another 100. I have a small time frame. That's another 100. Also, you interrupted my concentration. That's the last 100.
I think you're taking advantage of us.
Gertrude shrugged.
I see your point.
Robert and Lisa, you were taken aback.
Really?
Sure.
Shoved the dress into Lucy's hands.
Good luck finding the other best seamstress in town.
Lisa. She and Robert looked down at the dress, then at each other. Robert reached for his coin purse. Thag and his troop still waited by the road.
Thag grew annoyed as he heard more snoring. Salik glared at his leader.
Sir, I...
Thag put up his hand to silence Salik.
Don't you even say it!
Salik pointed to the empty road angrily.
I don't need to.
Thag hung his head, feeling defeated.
I know!
Thag dropped onto his hindquarters on the ground.
Oh, I don't know what we're gonna do about the bugbears. We still owe them gold.
Salik walked over to Thag and put a hand on his shoulder.
We're screwed.
Thag sneered at Salik.
Thanks.
After the annoying noble siblings left, Gertrude closed up her shop. She hated having to set up her elaborate security system, but if she was to find her materials for this new project, she needed to start now. Night had fallen and the road was still empty. Thag shook his head.
We should pack it in.
Thag walked around to the other goblins
Get up!
and proceeded to kick them awake. The goblins woke up to a screaming Thag.
We're abandoning this stupid plan.
Isn't this your plan?
Thag shot a furious glare at the goblin. Thag shook his head and continued walking.
Let's just get back to camp.
Gertrude trudged around the countryside. Needed to go down this lesser-traveled road to find the right cotton plants. They seemed to only grow in this area, much to Gertrude's annoyance. Thag and his goblins made their way back to camp. Thag stopped as he heard something.
Wait!
Thag put a hand to his ear.
Didn't you hear that?
Thag smiled.
Why, that sounds like...
Thag turned to look at Salik with his sly smile.
me! Being right!
Salik sneered. Thag motioned for the other goblins to follow him.
Come on, then! We have our score!
Gertrude searched as best as she could in the dark, but was having very little luck.
Damn it! Why did I decide to look so fake? How could this get worse?
Thag readied his goblin troops who had a net. He stood back a few feet.
All right, on my signal.
Salik glared at Thag.
Why are you standing so far away?
I need to supervise now. Wait for my signal.
Salik sneered as he gripped his part of the net.
Whatever.
Gertrude continued to look for her materials.
Plants were right here last time I looked. Where?
Gertrude noticed the bushes moving. It made her suspicious.
What's going on?
Salik turned to Thag, looking worried.
It's noticed us.
Thag panicked and furiously pointed towards the creature he could not see.
Get it! Get it now!
Gertrude stared at the bushes curiously.
Is someone there? Are you peeping on me? Stop watching, you pervert!
The goblins jumped out of the bushes with the net in their hands. Gertrude looked horrified.
Goblins?
It was too late. The net was dropped on her.
Get this off of me!
Not a chance.
Salik looked Gertrude up and down in confusion and disgust.
Human?
Salik shook his head and regained his focus.
Anyway, you're coming with us.
Gertrude was enraged by the situation. She grasped the net in both hands and gritted her teeth.
I don't have time
Gertrude started ripping the net apart.
for this!
With Herculean strength and a primal scream, Gertrude ripped the net off. Salik and the other goblins watched this in horror.
Oh no.
Thag stayed back in the bushes to supervise his men, although he could only hear his men fight the human. Thag smiled.
Sounds like the boys are doing well.
Oh!
Is all Salik could say as Gertrude's fist crashed against his face. Another goblin tried to jump on her back. But Gertrude heard her assailant, spun around, and slammed her fist into the goblin's stomach. Gertrude pummeled several goblins.
Salik lied on the ground, holding his bleeding nose. As he rolled on the ground, he noticed a large stick nearby. He looked towards his companions, who were not doing well, fight the beast. Salik saw his opportunity. He grabbed the stick and charged towards the monster. He jumped up and brought the stick down on Gertrude's head. Gertrude fell to the ground unconscious. Gertrude only saw darkness for a moment. She had few dreams when she slept, which she didn't mind. She hated her dreams.
Oh.
Gertrude awakened. As she looked around the tattered tent, she realized she wasn't home. Gertrude tried to get up, but found her hands and legs were bound.
Oh, come on!
What?
Salik nodded with a sneer on his face as the two goblins stood outside of the prisoner's tent. Essentially Salik's tent due to there being a lack of a prisoner's tent, much to Salik's chagrin.
I said she has nothing but a basket.
Salik said angrily as he held his black eye from the fight. Thag shook his head in disbelief.
But Fang Rain will be here tomorrow.
I know that.
Oh, what to do? What to do?
A thought came to Thag. He faced his second-in-command with a stern look.
Let me see the prisoner.
Oh, now you want to see it.
Thag glared at Salik. Thag walked into the tent to find Gertrude standing up with broken ropes at her feet and a look of rage in her face. She glared down at the little goblin leader.
Hi, Goblin.
Thag stared up at Gertrude in awe. He looked upon her large jowls covered in warts. He looked upon her stringy blonde hair that looked like thin, wet hay. He looked into her dull brown eyes and thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Thag turned to Salik.
Salik, go!
Thag found Salik was already gone.
Salik?
Salik was running far from the goblin camp.
Yeah, I'm done with this.
And so Salik left for his own adventures. But that is a story for another day. Gertrude held Thag up by his throat.
I will end you.
Thag struggled, but not much.
Before you do, can I ask you something?
What do you want?
Thag smiled.
May I look at your face a little longer?
Gertrude was confused and annoyed by the goblin's request. And intrigued.
What?
Thag looked at the hand that was choking him.
Could you loosen your grip, please?
Gertrude thought about it for a moment. Thag continued to plead.
Please?
Gertrude didn't know why, or maybe she did. But she loosened her grip. Sort of.
Thank you.
Gertrude shrugged.
It's the least I could do before I kill you.
You're mad, aren't you?
That comment made Gertrude angrier and tightened her grip.
Oh. I understand why you're mad.
Gertrude's grip tightened even more.
Do you?
Thag struggled.
You don't understand. We're just trying to survive. I mean, I don't even enjoy robbing anyone. But I'm a goblin. No one will give me anything just because of who I am. Can't you understand that?
Gertrude suddenly let go of Thag and he dropped to the ground. Thag looked up at Gertrude, who stared down at him in shock.
I do know what that's like.
It's about time someone did.
Thag, I'm here for what you owe.
Gertrude was surprised.
What was that?
Oh, my luck.
Thag looked up at Gertrude as he took her hand in his.
Listen, I know we've only known each other for a few moments, but I know that I love you. I know it's a bit forward, but I'm pretty sure I'm about to die. So before I do, I want to give you two things. Your freedom and my heart.
Gertrude stared down at Thag uncomfortably for a moment before she mustered the courage to say,
Sure.
Gertrude slipped her hand away from Thag's and proceeded to run out of the tent. Thag nodded solemnly.
I thought that would happen.
Thag made his way to a clearing in the forest to meet with Pendraun, a large hairy bugbear, a large cousin of goblins, along with 2 other bugbears. Pendraun snared at Thag as the goblin approached.
About time.
The bugbear leader looked Thag over.
Funny. I don't see you carrying what you owe me.
Thag sneered back at Pendraun.
Really? I don't think you look close enough.
Thag unsheathed his sword.
Here's what I owe you. A sword in the gut!
Pendraun stared down at the defiant goblin for a moment, then broke into laughter.
I didn't know you could be so funny, Thag.
Thag pointed his sword at Pendraun.
No jokes, Fangreen. I will no longer live under your rule.
Pendraun sneered.
Correction.
Pendraun and his men unsheathed their weapons.
You will no longer live.
Thag shouted at the top of his lungs.
Attack!
Thag looked around curiously as none of his men came to his aid. Pendraun broke into laughter.
You idiot. Your loyal band ran off as soon as they saw us.
Fine.
Thag charged towards Pendraun.
Then I'll kill you myself!
Pendraun looked bored.
Okay.
Pendraun backhanded Thag to the ground, canceling Thag's epic charge. Pendraun looked down in boredom and disgust.
Are we done now?
Thag faced the ground, mainly not to show the tears he was fighting back.
Just get it over with!
Pendraun nodded.
As you wish.
Pendraun lifted his sword over his head. He was about to bring it down on the goblin's neck when a sound distracted him.
Oof. Huh?
Pendraun looked back to see that Gertrude had knocked out his 2 bugbear cohorts.
What the hell are you?
Gertrude walked up to Pendraun, looking into his eyes with fury.
Pissed!
Gertrude delivered a punch to the bugbear leader's mouth. Pendraun fell to the ground with blood and teeth trailing behind as unconsciousness overtook him. Thag looked up in shock.
You came back!
Gertrude walked over to Thag and with one massive meaty hand lifted him so that he was inches from her face.
You're damn right I did.
Gertrude brought Thag in for a deep kiss. A few days later, Robert and Lisa's carriage traveled down the trail. Inside, as per usual, the privileged siblings bickered.
I can't believe you're making me say how.
You're the one that wanted her dress repaired.
Thag hid in some bushes as he watched the carriage going by. He whispered over his shoulder.
Are you ready?
The carriage continued its trek with its passengers unaware of the goings-on around them.
Never said I would pay for it.
The siblings' discussion was suddenly brought to an end when the carriage suddenly stopped. The siblings tumbled out of the carriage. Robert exited first in a huff.
What is going...
Lisa saw her brother look up in shock. Lisa looked up to find the carriage driver was caught in a net.
Get this off me!
The siblings looked at each other. Before they could say anything or react, a large net fell over them.
Hey!
That is a finely crafted net!
Robert and Lisa found Thag and Gertrude staring at them with big, malicious smiles on their faces.
And this is robbery!
Gertrude, what are you doing? We were coming to pay you.
Gertrude walked over and grabbed her coin purse. She shook it at her former customer.
And you have.
Gertrude and Thag walked away hand in hand, laughing.
I thoroughly enjoyed the story my host Oliver had given me. I bid him adieu and asked where I should go next. He told me to make my way north to Pedroun. He said it would be a safe travel due to the constant vigil of the moose riders. I shook his hand, left him a few pointers to maintain his forge, and went upon my way. I had made my way to Pedroun. It was a long walk, especially for gnomish feet. I managed to make it safely to the path my new friend Oliver had told me about, and I had made it to the Pedronian city of Quotient. I thought that I would not be welcome considering Pedroun was predominantly human, but, to my surprise, they were very friendly. It wasn't long before I found myself at a tavern. The Munchy Moose. Best dish of poutine? I think that's what it's called. In town. And talking to a moose rider named Etienne, he told me of a tale of a legendary moose rider, Anethio.
On the outskirts of Pedroun was Fort Hoofkick. It had been built as a defense against the hill giants, who were a constant threat in the land of Pedroun. The captain of the fort was Sir Liam Gander. Liam was a tactical genius, which earned him the position. He was known for his ability to make the hard decision. On one particular day, he had to make a hard decision. There had been news of a group of hill giants to the east. Liam saw an opportunity to eliminate the threat by bringing a small force of his best men. Seemed like a no-brainer, but the catch was he had to leave some men behind, including his nephew Anethio. Anethio was a good boy. He really was. He always tried to please his uncle, emphasis on tried, but his inability to focus had some negative outcomes, like when he forgot to lock the moose stables. Or when he was sure he fixed Liam's wagon wheel. Or when he forgot to use a training spear for a training session. After a few too many incidents, Liam had to figure out what to do with Anethio. Until an idea struck him. Liam made his way to the training grounds, where some of the men were training. He looked around for Anethio. It didn't take long to find Anethio staring at a dummy with a spear in his hands. Liam's heart sank as Anethio, instead of practicing, was merely staring at his opponent blankly. Liam walked up to his nephew.
Anethio.
Anethio was startled and turned to look at his uncle, almost stabbing Liam with the spear. Luckily, Liam learned to anticipate his nephew's actions, so he was able to dodge the unintended blow.
Uncle, I'm sorry, my mind just...
It wandered, yes, I know. Listen, I need to talk to you. Come with me.
Liam and Anethio walked off together. Liam took Anethio to the barracks, where no one was for the moment.
All right, my boy, I have a special mission for...
Anethio continued walking without his uncle.
Anethio. Anethio.
Liam snapped his fingers. Anethio stopped, turned around, and found he had walked too far.
Oh, sorry.
Anethio walked back to his uncle.
Anyway, I have a special mission for you.
Anethio looked excited.
Really?
Liam nodded.
Yes, it's very important.
Anethio stared at his uncle in wonder.
What is it?
Have you ever done guard duty by the back wall?
Anethio shook his head.
No, I never have.
Well, you get to go to the back wall.
Anethio looked excited and nodded.
Great. What do I do?
Guarding it.
Oh, right.
Anethio thought about it for a moment.
Wait. The back wall faces the moat and the side of a mountain.
Liam was starting to get nervous.
True. And most people would think it's inaccessible.
I would agree with them.
Liam and Anethio stared at each other in silence. Liam managed to come up with some justification.
Which is the problem?
Anethio gave Liam a puzzled look, like a dog who didn't understand a command. Liam scrambled to explain his point.
You see, that is what our enemies would want us to think.
Anethio listened intently. Liam was excited that he had his nephew's attention. That was a hard fight unto itself. He just had to bring it home.
Our smarter enemies would take advantage of such an inaccessible path, thus making it the perfect pass for a sneak attack. In our confidence in its inaccessibility, we wouldn't expect a devastating attack from that position.
Liam looked his nephew in the eye in desperation that the young moose rider would buy it. He worried for a moment, until Anithio shrugged.
All right, I'll do it.
Thank you, my boy.
Liam put a hand on Anithio's shoulder.
You're doing your country a great service.
Anithio nodded and turned his attention to something on the ceiling.
Great! Say, has anyone else noticed that spider web?
I know it'll do me proud.
Liam walked away, with a sense of unease. Meanwhile, while Liam talked to Anithio, Brogue was talking to his fellow hill giants about his plans.
Moose riders will be coming.
The other hill giants growled at the mention of the dreaded moose riders. Brogue raised his hands to silence the other hill giants.
Calm, calm.
The hill giants quieted down to listen to their leader. Brogue continued his speech.
Now they not know they walk into trap.
Brogue had to calm his people down again.
Calm, calm.
The hill giants once again quieted down. Brogue continued.
While they here and busy, me and...
Brogue counted on his fingers to make sure.
4 of me best men will go to Moose Rider Fort and surprise leftover Moose Riders. Kill 2 moose with 1 rock.
The other hill giants cheered. Liam rode across the hills and valleys of Pedroun, the entire time with a strange feeling in his gut.
They hope I did the right thing.
What Liam and his men didn't notice was Brogue and his elite warriors spying on them from behind a large hill. Brogue addressed his men after the moose riders passed.
Those fools no notice us. We make our way to fort and surprise rest.
The elite warriors nodded and sneaked away, as well as giants could. Night fell over the fort. There was a handful of guards roaming around. Other guards roamed along the walls of the fortress. And Anithio stood at the back wall, staring at the side of a mountain. The only movement he noticed was that of a white bird. He watched it fly into the night sky. It looked so majestic and beautiful. Anithio wondered what kept it aloft. Where was the bird going, and what? Anithio shook his head.
No, Anithio. Focus. This is an important task.
Anithio stared intently in the direction of the mountain. He couldn't see how anyone would be able to get around it. But the moose riders had smart enemies, so he had to be vigilant. He looked up the mountain to the night sky, towards the stars. They shine beautifully in the sky. They were like shining, floating lanterns illuminating the night like... Brogue and his elite climbed a mountain. One of Brogue's elite, Ferg, looked up to his brave leader.
Great, leader.
Brogue continued climbing, but answered his subordinate in an irritated tone.
What?
You sure? Climbing mountain? Good idea?
What's it good idea? Moose riders not expect us come this way.
They think that, 'cause mountain is dangerous and killing us.
Huh. What you say? You my best warriors. No way mountain stop us.
We lost Pog.
Brogue looked down at Ferg in surprise.
What?
Ferg gestured his head downward. Brogue looked in that direction to indeed find Pog's body at the bottom of the mountain.
We too far now. Let's go.
Anithio continued to stargaze. The grip he had on his spear began to loosen. Brogue and his elite were climbing down the other side of the mountain. They were making their way towards the moat. Brogue signaled to his elite. Brogue's men nodded and let go of the mountain. Anithio continued to look at the stars until a noise startled him. Anithio looked down at the moat.
Huh?
Brogue and his elite hit the water in the moat. It was surprisingly deep. Brogue addressed his men.
All right, man. We swim for wall.
One of Brogue's elite, Baal, started struggling and splashing in the water.
Baldo can swim.
Brogue was filled with terror. Anethio looked towards where the splashing was coming from.
What is that?
Brogue was trying his best to help Baal. Baal ignored his leader's words as he fought to tread water.
You're drowning.
Brogue saw something he did not expect. There was a guard on the wall. There wasn't supposed to be a guard on the wall. Brogue had to think fast, which is not a strong suit for a hill giant. Brogue proceeded to shove Baal's head underwater. Anethio looked across the moat to try and find what was causing the splashing. He couldn't make out much in the darkness and the vastness of the moat until it sprang up. It was a giant rainbow bass that sprang up from the water and back into it. Anethio was delighted. He always thought the rainbow bass were such beautiful creatures. Their multicolored scales shined in the sunlight. In this case, the moonlight. They were just fascinating creatures. He thought it must have come from the nearby lake. There were a lot of interesting creatures in the lake. Anethio started to recount all the interesting creatures in the lake. Brogue saw that the stupid guard was distracted.
He's distracted. You come back up now.
Brogue took his hands off Baal's head, but Baal did not come back up. Brogue looked to his elite, at least what was left, Ferg and Yar, who stared back at him in horror. He pointed at them aggressively.
We don't talk about this.
Anethio soon grew bored watching the fish and went back to looking at the stars. He thought he saw the fish constellation. He tried to remember its name. Brogue and what was left of his elite swam up to the wall. Brogue pointed to Yar.
Yar.
Brogue pointed to the wall.
You climb first.
Yar nodded, looking very nervous. Yar swam up to the wall and began scaling the wall. Anethio continued to stare at the stars.
Pixers! That's it!
Anethio was so excited about remembering such an important fact when he went to lean on the wall but discovered the wall wasn't a wall but the tip of his spear. He discovered this as he felt the pain shoot through his arm as the spear tip pierced it.
Ow!
The pain caused Anethio to drop his spear over the wall. Brogue and Ferg watched Yar climb the wall.
You're a very good climber.
Brogue looked at Ferg. Ferg merely glared at Brogue.
You still mad about Ball? Get over it.
It happened seconds ago.
Yar climbed a wall. He stopped as he heard something. Yar looked up to see Anethio's spear falling towards him. He only had time to gasp. As the spear pierced through his head, skull, brain, and to more skull and head. Brogue and Ferg stared up, watching Yar.
Why he stop?
As if to answer Brogue, Yar fell off the wall and into the moat below. Brogue and Ferg looked at Yar's body floating in the water with the spear in his head. The two hill giants that were left stared back at each other in horror. Anethio looked over the wall, confused and curious.
That was a loud splash for a spear.
Brogue looked up to find a guard looking over the wall.
Oh no, hope he don't see us.
Brogue went to look at Ferg, only to see the last of his elite swimming away.
Where you going?
Far from terrible plan.
Anethio looked down to see a hill giant swimming in the moat.
Oh my god! Hill giants!
Brogue looked up as he heard the guard shout. He saw the guard run off.
Damn it. Hell with it.
Brogue started climbing. Anethio ran down the steps.
Giants! Giants!
Anethio made his way towards the armory. Brogue climbed a wall as quickly as he could. Brogue started climbing. Anethio ran into the armory, still sounding the alarm.
There's giants! Hill giants!
Anethio rifled through a weapons rack until he found a new spear.
Got you!
He proceeded back to the wall. Brogue continued his determined climb up the wall. Anethio made his way back to the wall. He was not paying attention, for he did not see the upturned stone in his wake and tripped, causing him to send his new spear flying through the air. Brogue finally made his way to the top of the wall. As he came over the wall, he saw a spear sailing towards him. Brogue could only say,
"Son of a..."
before the spear pierced through his head, his skull, and brain. Brogue, the great hill giant leader, was dead. His body fell back from whence it came. Anethio looked up from the ground to see no hill giants. He was very confused.
Huh?
Sir Liam and his moose riders rode back after their victory over the hill giants. Sir Liam and his moose riders approached the fort. In the distance, Liam saw some moose riders wheeling a dead hill giant, Brogue, and a few more moose riders lead a living hill giant in chains, Ferg. Liam looked at this display in shock.
What the hell did I miss?
I thank the Moose Riders for their hospitality and story. They sent me on my way towards Lingland, home of the halflings. I was provided with some, provisions and a small horse. I rode off seeking my next story.
was a safe trip to Lingland. I had made my way to the village of Big Bediksh. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Anyway, I didn't run into any trouble. So far, my quest was going well. The halflings were very polite and accommodating. The halflings were shorter than the humans, but still a bit taller than myself. In fact, some of the children thought I was a weird-looking child. I found myself at a local tavern called the Wheat and Clover. I also found myself sampling and rather enjoying different ales. The tavern keeper, Brady, seemed to enjoy my company. After some inspiration, being in the form of whiskies and rums, I told him about my project. He thought it was interesting. He asked me what I thought about yak farming. I thought it was a weird question at first, but I told him that I heard Lingland had been the best sheep herders in the world. Brady confirmed, but then he told me why sheep were no longer a resource.
On the outskirts of the village of Brannigan, a shepherd named Tillenoff watched his sheep graze. And by watched, I mean slept under a tree. Tillenoff flew through the sky. It felt good floating amongst the clouds. It was the only time Tillenoff felt free. A noise interrupted Tillenoff's flight. Tillenoff looked around in confusion.
Huh?
Tillenoff fell. Tillenoff awoke to a horrific sight. Wolves were eating one of his sheep. Tillenoff jumped to his feet and yelled at the wolves.
Wait. Leave him!
One wolf glared and growled at Tillenoff. He suddenly lost his bravery.
You know what? Never mind. Finish your meal.
Tillenoff backed away. Tillenoff herded what was left of his sheep, at least 5. Tillenoff travelled in silent fear. His wife, Iufi, was going to be angry.
She is going to kill me.
Iufi's screams could be heard from outside of her and Tillenoff's home.
I should kill you.
Tillenoff braced himself against a wall as his wife screamed at him. It was a loveless marriage. Tillenoff's father was a shepherd, and his a shepherd before him. He inherited the family business and was persuaded by his family to marry Iufi due to her huge tracts of land. That isn't a euphemism. Iufi's family had a lot of land. For 10 years the marriage, was working until Iufi discovered Tillenoff's laziness. This was not the first sheep Tillenoff lost. Some had wandered off under his watchful eye. Tillenoff used to be rich in sheep, but he was proof that skill is not genetic.
You're the stupidest, laziest halfling I've ever had the misfortune to know.
Tillenoff grew furious. He wasn't going to take that. She was completely right, but he still wasn't going to take that.
I don't need your flapping your gob at me, woman.
Tillenoff stomped towards the door.
Where do you think you're going?
Tillenoff glared at his wife as he held on to the door.
Anywhere he aren't.
And with that clever rebuttal, Tillenoff slammed the door behind him as he stormed off. Tillenoff made his way to his safe place, which was the Tipsy Tavern on the outskirts of the village. Tillenoff was on his 3rd ale. The barkeep glared at Tillenoff.
You should take it easy on them drinks, boy. Especially since you haven't paid yet.
Tillenoff sneered at the barkeep.
I've had a bad day, but you just keep on coming. All right.
Tillenoff staggered back home. He stopped when he came up with a genius idea.
Of course. Why didn't I think of it before?
It was morning over Tillenoff's home. Iufi was packing a bag in her marital bedroom.
But good for nothing. Poiler.
She had packed this bag several times before. But this time, this was the last time. Iufi cringed as she heard a familiar voice.
Darling, are you here? I have a surprise.
Iufi looked up to whatever being ran the universe.
Give me the strength to deal with this man.
Iufi walked into the living quarters to meet her smiling husband. She sneered at him.
You better have a good surprise. One that explains why you were out all night.
Tilanoff had a cocky smile on his face.
That all did.
Great.
Iufi looked around. After finding nothing, she gave her beloved a sneer.
Where is it then?
Tilanoff chuckled.
It's outside, silly.
Tilanoff led Iufi outside and towards the back of their home.
I've solved our wolf problem.
Iufi smiled.
Thank goodness.
Iufi's excitement faded as she met an old Great Dane. It was a skinny, sickly-looking dog that wheezed when it barked. Iufi glared at her husband.
This?
Tilanoff nodded in excitement and obliviousness.
Aye, his name is Wolf Slayer.
Iufi merely glared at Tilanoff. He became curious.
What? What?
Iufi rolled her eyes, sighed, and shook her head as she walked off.
What? He's a wolf killer. You'll see.
Tilanoff looked and smiled at his new guard dog.
Ain't that right, boyo?
Wolf Slayer was in a deep sleep.
He's just resting for work later. That's all.
Tilanoff had brought his sheep to a field for them to feed. Tilanoff found his favourite tree with just the right amount of shade. He lay under it to rest his eyes. Tilanoff had another flying dream, and, again, was awakened by the screaming of sheep.
Oh no.
Tilanoff awoke to find wolves feasting on another sheep. Tilanoff looked around frantically.
Wolf Slayer, where are ye?
Tilanoff saw Wolf Slayer lying on his side, dead. The old dog was slain by a wolf, but time...
Oh, that was a waste of 5 silver.
Tilanoff snuck what was left of his sheep, 3 this time, away from the wolves, and Tilanoff cursed to himself the entire trip.
Ah, damn son of a bitch. Damn it, damn it, damn it.
Tilanoff had stopped and sat down on the path home. He was in no hurry to get a talking to by Iufi.
What am I going to do?
Tilanoff found himself talking to one of his sheep. The sheep merely answered by bleating, which made Tilanoff sneer.
Well, you were a big help.
I can help you there, then what?
Tilanoff looked up in surprise to find a rotund man with a black goatee wearing black robes and a black wide-brimmed hat standing over him. The dark stranger smiled down at the halfling.
Seems like you're having some distress here, then what?
Iufi was home alone. She normally didn't mind because it was a moment of peace before the idiot came home. It gave her time to clean and consider her escape plan. However, Tilanoff was taking a while this time. Iufi, for once, was worried about her husband.
Where is that man?
Tilanoff and the dark stranger talked.
And those damn wolves keep eating me sheep.
The dark stranger listened to Tilanoff intently.
That is a problem there, then what?
A sly smile came over the dark stranger's face.
Maybe I could help you there.
Tilanoff gave the dark stranger a surprised and excited look. The dark stranger led Tilanoff to a wagon covered in several curiosities. Tilanoff looked at it with awe.
Ye have many interesting things there, Mr.
Tilanoff thought for a moment. The dark stranger simply smiled at Tilanoff.
I think I have the thing for you here, then what?
Tilanoff was going to ask the dark stranger's name again, but the dark stranger turned and walked towards the wagon. Tilanoff ran to catch up. Iufi was about to go find her husband.
I hope he's okay.
Iufi got about 5 feet from her house when she saw Tilanoff in the distance. She breathed a sigh of relief.
Oh, thank goodness. He's alive.
Iufi gritted her teeth in rage.
I'm going to kill him.
A few moments ago, the dark stranger had given Tilanoff a book. Tilanoff looked at the book in awe. The book's cover was made of a strange leather, which felt like his own skin, which led him to believe it was made of...
Nope.
Tilanoff shook his head to avoid finishing his thought. He continued to peruse the strange book. It had no title, but a symbol on the cover. The symbol was the head of what looked like a goat on top of a red pentagram. Tilanoff looked up at the dark stranger.
Thank you, miss.
But when Tilanoff looked up, the dark stranger and his wagon were gone. Tilanoff walked the path home with the book in his hands. He read through it, finding many interesting things.
Tilanoff!
Tilanoff hid the book behind his back as Ayufai got closer. She didn't seem to notice the book. She was more concerned with catching her breath.
Where? Yeah.
Tilanoff panicked for a moment. He hated telling his wife about what happened, especially when she was right, so he thought up the best lie he could, with a little bit of truth in there. He got upset.
You listen here, woman.
Ayufai was taken aback by her husband's sudden assertiveness. Tilanoff continued his recreation of events.
Can't you see I'm distraught?
Ayufai was surprised and concerned for her husband.
What happened to you?
Well, not that ye care, but I and the flock were attacked by the wolves. Wolfslayer gave his life to protect us.
Ayufai looked at the remaining sheep, who she counted in her head. Tilanoff knew what she was doing, so he had to interrupt her thoughts.
The poor boy was outnumbered, so yes, we may have lost a few sheep.
Ayufai shook her head in disbelief.
Oh, I can't believe that, old Matt. Code protect anything.
Can't ye have some respect for the dead woman? Especially a hero.
Ayufai was taken aback.
I'm sorry.
Tilanoff waved his wife off, before angrily storming past her with his remaining sheep with him.
Leave me be, ye insensitive witch.
Ayufai felt guilt and sympathy for her husband, which was a first for her. In the bedroom, Ayufai slept. She slept so soundly that she didn't notice her husband was not in bed with her. Tilanoff pored over his new book in the barn. He was learning so much. Tilanoff had never been a fan of books, but this one was fascinating. This one held so many secrets. This one held power. Tilanoff's focus was on one of his sheep. The sheep merely looked up at him curiously. Tilanoff waved his hands around, muttering under his breath. Then Tilanoff opened his hands and shouted towards the sheep.
Plisgodi!
A purple energy surrounded the sheep, which excited Tilanoff.
Yes, it's working.
Until the hum got louder, and the sheep began to panic. And the sheep's panic caused Tilanoff to panic.
What's wrong? What are ye?
Tilanoff was interrupted by the sheep exploding, spraying Tilanoff with sheep gore. Tilanoff stood covered in sheep gore.
That could have gone better.
Tilanoff snuck into the bedroom to check on Ayufai. He breathed a sigh of relief to find his wife still sleeping. Tilanoff had a sheep cornered in the barn. It had seen what he did to the last sheep, and was understandably frightened. Tilanoff waved his hands over the sheep.
Relax. I know what I'm doing now.
Tilanoff muttered an incantation under his breath. Then he shouted a magic word at the sheep.
Krabande.
Tilanoff was excited to see a yellow glow around the sheep this time. Tilanoff laughed maniacally.
Yes.
Until the sheep suddenly shrank, which surprised Tilanoff.
Huh?
Tilanoff could still hear the sheep.
Sheep? Sheepy?
Tilanoff continued to look around for the sheep.
Here, sheep. Here, sheepy. Where are ye?
Tilanoff found the tiny sheep as he felt his foot step on something. He cringed as he felt moisture and warmth on the bottom of his foot.
Oh no.
Tilanoff looked at the bottom of his foot to find the gore of what used to be the tiny sheep.
Oh God.
Tilanoff read through the book desperately.
Come on.
He had but one sheep left, so he needed the next spell to work.
There has to be something in here.
As if the book had heard his question, it answered him as he came across a page.
What's this?
Tilanoff read the page. It told him how to change prey to predator, but required a blood sacrifice.
A blood sacrifice? Where am I?
A dark, malicious smile came over Tillenov's face as a dark, malicious thought entered his mind.
Well, she is concerned for the well-being of the sheep.
Iofai continued to sleep. It's unclear what woke Iofai up. She was quite the sound sleeper, but she did wake up startled. Iofai tried to get out of bed.
What?
She found that she was bound to the bed. She looked up to see Tillenhof standing over her with a malicious smile on his face. He gave her a wave.
Good morning, darling.
Iofai looked at the ropes tied around her wrists, and then back at her husband in confusion, fear, and rage.
What's the meaning of this?
Tillenhof shrugged.
Sorry, my love, but the road to success
Tillenhof pulled a knife from behind his back.
requires sacrifice.
Tillenhof made his way towards his wife. She struggled against her bonds, but to no avail. She tried pleading with her husband.
Tillenhof? No. Don't. Please. I love ya.
When Tillenhof got to the bed, he laughed.
Oh, darling.
He lifted the knife over his head.
We both know that ain't true.
He shrugged.
But if it makes you feel better.
And brought the knife down.
I feel the same.
Tillenhof chained his last sheep to a post. He had wiped blood all over it, and carefully looked through the book. The sheep panicked. Tillenhof glared at the creature.
Would you quiet down? I got the right ingredient this time.
Tillenhof took a deep breath and began muttering an incantation, and ended it with a shout. A grey energy surrounded the sheep. Tillenhof looked worried as the sheep panicked violently.
Come on, boyo. Don't fail me here.
Then, suddenly, the sheep stopped panicking and the energy hum stopped.
Wow. That's it? Was there a change?
Tillenhof was surprised by the ordeal. The sheep was surprisingly calm now. This calm unnerved Tillenhof. He looked into the sheep's eyes, which were bright red now.
Well, you're very creepy now.
Tillenhof shrugged.
I'll worry about it in the morning. I need some sleep.
Tillenhof went to walk away, but stopped when he realized something.
Oh, yeah. I can't really go to bed, can I?
Tillenhof led his last sheep down the path. He looked back at it. The only sound the new sheep made was its hooves on the ground. Tillenhof was still unnerved, but his excitement over being successful overrode his feelings of unease. He shrugged to himself.
I'm sure it's fine.
Tillenhof stood in the centre of the village, where everyone was cheering him.
Hooray, Tillenhof! What a fella. He's so handsome.
The mayor, a robust halfling, walked up to Tillenhof with a giant key.
For your contributions to the Huffling race, I present you the key to the city.
Tillenhof took in the praise and applause, until he heard something else. Tillenhof looked around.
Did any of ye hear that?
Tillenhof looked around with growing concern.
It's getting louder.
The crowd ignored Tillenhof and continued to cheer. Tillenhof started to panic as he saw several wolves coming up over the horizon. He pointed and shouted,
Behind ye! Wolves!
The crowd continued to ignore and cheer Tillenhof.
You daft fools, look behind you!
The crowd continued to cheer, even as wolves attacked some of its members. Tillenhof screamed at the crowd.
Look, damn it! Look!
Tillenhof watched in horror.
Ah!
Tillenhof woke up to a horrible noise. But the horror wasn't wolves eating Tillenhof's sheep, per usual. but it was the other way around. The sheep had rows of razor-sharp teeth as it roared. Yes, roared. Large, black, bat-like wings protruded from its woolly back, as 3 large green tentacles grew from deep within the wool, choking wolves. Tilanoff watched in amazement and horror as the other wolves ran off. While the tentacles of the sheep squeezed the captured wolves until bones broke. Tilanoff watched aghast as he slowly made his way towards the path.
Please don't see me, please don't see me, please don't see me.
Unfortunately for Tilanoff, the sheep's red eyes caught his. Tilanoff was paralyzed with fear.
Hey, friend. Nice job on the wolves.
Tilanoff and the sheep stared at each other in uncomfortable silence.
Well, I'll leave you to it.
Tilanoff continued to make his way back to the path as the sheep continued to stare at him. Then, suddenly, the sheep charged towards Tilanoff, who screamed in horror at his experiment that went horribly right.
No!
Another herd of sheep were grazing. When Tilanoff's sheep came upon the new herd, he had already satisfied one hunger with wolf and Tilanoff meat. He had other appetites as he got the scent of the female sheep. A big, toothy grin came across the sheep's face as he made his way to join his sheep brethren.
After a few days at the inn getting over my hangover, I made my way out of Lingland, bidding my kind halfling hosts goodbye. As I made my way south towards Schoonskraeg, I saw some sheep. I quickly made my way past them without getting their attention. I had found my way into the swamps of Schoonskraeg, and I lost my steed to a tar pit. Speaking of which, I had found my own tar pit, and I'm currently sinking. I think that this is potentially my last entry. I would like to apologize. Good news, friends. Before the tar pit could claim me, a young man had plucked me out just in time. Most surprisingly was he was a conqueror by dawn. Now, the conquerors by dawn were Schoonskraeg's military, who, from what I've heard, were almost on par with the Moose Riders of Pedroun. They called themselves the Conquerors by Dawn based on a silly prophecy that goes, what was it? Oh yes. One day the sun will shine over Pairodie, and everything the light touches shall be Schoonskraeg once more. Whatever. He saved my life, so I honestly don't care. Anyway, he told me that he was on his tour. Now, the tour was when high-ranking conquerors must travel the world for a year, getting into as many battles as possible while their recorder, essentially a slave whose sole purpose was to write down the conqueror's exploits, objectively, of course, judge their progress. The young conqueror's name was Dirges, and with him was his observer, Lumiere, a rather snooty elf slave. I tried to talk to Lumiere, but he was not interested in talking to me. I heard elves were not very sociable, but Dirges was very hospitable. He had provided me some provisions, warmth from his campfire, and, most importantly, he had a story to tell me.
It was dark over the town of Wraith. A dark figure walked through the town. He was a hefty man in black clothes, with a black hood over his head. He made his way to the local tavern, their dagger and fork. The dark figure walked into the inn and looked around. There were a few people in the tavern, but those who were there were too busy drinking and talking, so they were not paying attention or paying him no mind. That was good. He needed to be discreet. He needed to protect his reputation and his people, mostly his reputation. He picked a table in a dark corner and sat down. He waited and waited. Thaddeus, an extravagantly dressed man with a bald head and black goatee, walked into the tavern. He looked around. When he found the dark figure in the corner, he smiled.
There he is. It's showtime.
The dark figure had fallen asleep, waiting for his friend.
Good morning, Mayor Gordon.
The dark figure, Mayor Gordon, awoke in a panic.
What are you doing? Don't say my name.
Thaddeus chuckled.
Relax. Everyone here is more concerned with their drinks.
Mayor Gordon sneered at Thaddeus.
I still require discretion about all.
The mayor looked around, leaning towards Thaddeus. He whispered,
Problem.
Thaddeus smirked.
Your problem. It's not my problem until I'm paid.
I told you that you will get paid when the problem was taken care of.
Right. Well, I do need some incentive to keep quiet.
The mayor glared at Thaddeus as he handed him a small sack of coins.
Here.
Thaddeus took the coin purse and inspected it.
Sounds a bit light.
The mayor rolled his eyes.
You'll get a bigger purse when the job is done. Now get going.
Thaddeus shrugged.
All right.
Thaddeus stood up and motioned for the mayor to follow.
Let's go.
The mayor was shocked.
What?
Don't you want me to eliminate the...
Thaddeus looked around the bar like the mayor did in a mocking fashion. He leaned towards the mayor.
Problem?
The mayor glared at Thaddeus. Thaddeus and the mayor walked on a path that led outside of the town. Thaddeus smiled at the mayor.
So, how long have you had this problem?
The mayor side-eyed Thaddeus.
I don't really know. People started disappearing. It took a while for us to start finding bodies. Well,
the mayor looked disgusted.
What was left of them?
The mayor shivered. He looked to Thaddeus.
How long have you dealt with this kind of problem?
Thaddeus rolled his eyes.
Werewolves?
The mayor looked at Thaddeus in shock.
We're far enough from town. We can speak plainly.
The mayor shrugged.
All right, fine. How long have you dealt with werewolves?
Long enough.
Thaddeus side-eyed the mayor.
What clued you into it being a werewolf? Are you a werewolf expert yourself?
We're howling after what we found. There are plenty of reports of a half-man, half-wolf creature. It doesn't take an expert to figure it out.
Fair enough.
Thaddeus looked ahead.
I think it's coming up ahead.
Thaddeus and the mayor made their way to a cave. Thaddeus stopped.
Here we are.
The mayor looked at Thaddeus in shock.
What are you doing? It will hear you.
Thaddeus turned to the mayor and smiled.
I know. I'm trying to get his attention.
The mayor started to panic.
You wanted to come out? Wait, did you say him?
As if to answer the mayor's question, a man walked out of the cave. He was a large, muscular, hairy fellow with a beard. The only place he didn't have hair was on the top of his head. He had a big smile on his face.
Thaddeus, hello.
Thaddeus waved to the large, hairy man.
Hello, Grogus.
The mayor looked from Thaddeus to Grogus and back many times.
What's going on? Who is this?
Thaddeus and Grogus looked at each other and broke into laughter.
I'm sorry. How rude of me.
Thaddeus gestured towards Grogus.
This is Grogus. He...
The mayor was excited.
Is he going to help us with the werewolf?
A malicious smile came across Thaddeus' face.
Not quite. You see, he is the werewolf, and he's going to help me get paid.
What's up?
The mayor's excitement turned to horror as he watched Grogus change. Grogus' hair grew thicker and longer. His nails grew into black claws. His mouth grew into a large maw with razor-sharp teeth. The mayor stood paralyzed in front of Grogus as he finished his transformation into a wolf-man hybrid form. The mayor tried to plead.
No. Please. Don't.
But Grogus the wolf didn't hear the pleas. All he heard were the screams of his prey as he pounced upon it. Thaddeus could not watch Grogus' grisly work, so he turned his back as his werewolf friend finished his work.
Must you chew so loud?
Grogus was finishing up his last helping of Mayor Gordon. He looked towards Thaddeus and belched. Thaddeus sneered.
Charming.
Grogus shrugged as he changed back into his human form.
Didn't get time to work on my manners while I was living in a cave.
Thaddeus looked towards Grogus.
We need to...
Thaddeus saw that Grogus was naked.
I can't talk to you like this.
Thaddeus searched through his knapsack. He grabbed some clothes and threw them to Grogus.
Here.
Grogus put the clothes on with a sneer.
Prude.
Thaddeus rolled his eyes again.
Anyway, our next target is the city of Thox. Will you be ready in the next couple of months?
Grogus nodded as he finished getting dressed.
Yes, I know the drill.
Thaddeus glared at Grogus.
Don't get an attitude with me. I'm the reason you have access to food. Show me some respect.
Grogus sneered at Thaddeus.
Yes, master. Of course, master.
Thaddeus sneered.
Get going. I have to get back to the mayor's house and rob him blind.
Grogus started walking away.
How many jobs have we had?
Too many. I'm hoping this city job is the last one.
Me too.
The two men went their separate ways. After a few months, and it was night over the city of Thox, a large, dark figure roamed the streets of the city. He knew he needed to find a discreet place to discuss his problem. He found a tavern, the Swamp Lily, and entered. The dark figure entered the tavern. It was full of people drinking and talking. The dark figure looked around. When he saw a table in a dark corner, he went to it immediately and sat down. There he waited and waited and waited. Thaddeus entered the tavern. He looked around and soon found the client. He smiled.
Jackpot.
Thaddeus sat across from the dark stranger.
Hello, Governor.
The dark figure, Governor, stared at Thaddeus.
Hello.
Thaddeus was taken aback by how calm the governor was, but managed to keep his charade up.
I'm here to take care of your problem.
The governor smiled.
Great.
The governor suddenly stood up.
Let's go.
Thaddeus was taken aback again, but still kept his composure.
All right, let's go.
Thaddeus and the governor were walking through the city. Thaddeus looked to the governor, who was abnormally calm. He had to break the silence.
So, how long have you had your problem?
The governor looked at Thaddeus, betraying no emotion.
It started a few months ago, after the reports in Wraith came out.
Thaddeus caught himself before he could gasp in shock. How did this guy know about Wraith? Where did the reports come from? Something was up, but Thaddeus couldn't give up the game.
Is that right? Where did you get your information?
The governor pointed forward.
This is the quickest way out of town.
The governor quickened his pace. Thaddeus followed and wondered after him. Thaddeus and the governor were walking down a path outside of the city. Thaddeus pointed up ahead.
I think we're almost there.
The governor merely nodded. Thaddeus was getting annoyed with his calm demeanor. He couldn't wait for this job to be over. Thaddeus and the governor stopped at a cave.
This is where I believe the
Thaddeus' thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a fire, and a smell of cooked meat hit his nostrils. Thaddeus was confused and scared.
What's going on here?
The governor shrugged as a sly smile came across his face. Thaddeus looked puzzled. He shook his head and ran into the cave. Thaddeus entered the cave to see Grogus eating mutton next to a fire. Thaddeus was confused and enraged by the sight.
What are you doing?
Grogus stared at Thaddeus.
Eating.
Where did you get that meat?
Grogus continued to eat as he pointed his mutton to the opening of the cave. Thaddeus turned round to find the governor standing before him.
What the?
The governor smiled.
Hi.
The governor threw off his clothes and hat, revealing dark armor and a tattoo of a rising sun.
You're a conqueror general?
The governor, conqueror, sneered at Thaddeus.
Yes, I am.
The governor, conqueror, unsheathed his sword.
And you?
And proceeded to stab Thaddeus.
Ha! Are dead.
Thaddeus fell to the ground. He looked up at the governor conqueror in horror as he gurgled his last breath. As he died. The governor conqueror looked towards Grogus with a smile.
How's your meat?
Grogus continued to eat as if his partner had not just been killed.
This is great. It really doesn't cost much to get me this.
The governor conqueror shook his head.
No, just a few silver. Speaking of silver...
The governor conqueror unsheathed a dagger and threw it towards Grogus.
Ha!
Grogus was so surprised that he was unable to react.
Huh?
The silver dagger hit Grogus between the eyes. He fell backward, dead. The governor conqueror dusted off his hands.
Forgot to mention, conquerors don't make deals.
And with that, the governor conqueror left.
Young conqueror's hospitality and story, although I did find it a bit biased, but one does not disrespect one's host. Sturgis was kind enough to escort me to the swamp of the Scaly, which was on the border between Schoonskraeg and Brogue. Brogue is the home of the Minotaurs, which I was very curious to meet. These cow people, I think they're called. This was just getting more exciting. Sturgis brought me to the swamp of the Scaly. He told me it was called that due to the lizard folk that had migrated there. Their appearance had upset the Minotaurs of Brogue, who thought it was their property, even though they didn't seem to care about it until the lizard folk moved in. This was the cause of what was called the Tyranno-Bovine War. Sturgis and I parted company near the outskirts of Brogue. He said he wasn't afraid of the Minotaurs, he just didn't feel like fighting a village. I didn't judge. I wished him well, although I can't say that I meant it, seeing as his mission was world conquest. I walked through the swamp a little worried, my dagger before me,
Dirges had given me a dagger to defend myself. I heard something. It was music. It was nothing I had heard before. It was beautiful, yet sad. I had to investigate. Followed the music to an interesting Minotaur fellow. He had one S-shaped horn and bright blue fur. We struck up a conversation. He told me his name was Buxford Buford Monarch, but he asked that I just call him the Blue Baby. I thought it was a strange name, but one does not like to be rude. He told me that he lived in the swamp. His voice was different. I had heard that the Minotaur speak was guttural and rolled their R's, but Buxford, the Blue Baby, had a very gravelly voice. Although I was collecting more cultural tales, this fellow had a story that intrigued me.
In the country of Brogue, in a village of Burnett Fur, a Minotaur by the name of Ebe worked at his forge. The forge was old Ebe's life. He lived and breathed for metal masterpieces so much that he left his wife Eileen home alone on many occasions. Although soon she would not be alone. Speaking of Eileen, she was home, alone, giving birth to a son. Ebe continued to hammer his sword he was working on. A Minotaur villager ran up to Ebe's forge. Ebe, come quick. Eileen's in labor. Ebe stopped hammering in irritation.
All right. I'll be over there once I'm done with this sword.
Ebe went back to hammer. The Minotaur villager stared at Ebe in shock.
Oh, okay then.
Ebe made his way home eventually.
All right. Let's see my...
Ebe was shocked to find his pride and joy was very different. Bright blue fur, S-shaped horns, which disgusted Ebe.
What is this?
Ebe was upset by his defective son, which upset Eileen.
This is your son.
Ebe could only stare in disgust.
I wouldn't say that.
The two new parents stared at each other in silent rage.
Don't you want to meet your boy?
I ain't got the time. I've no mouths to feed. I have to work double.
Hubby, don't you dare leave.
But old Obey would have none of it. He stormed off. I won't bore you with my development, so I'll just skip to the more important events of my life. It was my 10th year of life, I think, and my father reluctantly made me his apprentice. I did my best, but after dropping his tools and setting his forge on fire, he had demoted me. I don't know how you demote an apprentice, but anyway, my job was to sweep up the forge. The day came, I was sweeping and trying to avoid my father when they came.
Buckfoot, get your ass home. Get this boy. Get.
I ran home and told Mother everything that happened. She was worried.
Oh, you poor boy. Your voice. Oh my God.
My mother gave me a big hug. She looked down at me.
Wait. Where's your father?
As if Mother's concern summoned him, my father burst into the house.
Ah, you little shite!
There was an axe in my father's hands, He looked at me with rage and hate. I very quickly realized his intentions. He charged towards me.
You ruined my livelihood! I'll kill you!
He brought his axe down towards me. I felt it hit. And the pain didn't come immediately until I saw the horn in my hands. One of my horns was in my hands. That's when I felt the pain. My father got ready to finish me off, but Mother got in the way.
Don't you lay a hand on him.
She looked at me with fear and sadness in her eyes.
Book that! Run!
I did as my mother told me and I ran out of there. And into the night, I never saw my parents again. I don't know how long I ran. I don't know how long, but I ended up in the swamp with this cabin. It was not when I got myself good and lost in the swamp. I was tired, lost, and scared. So I did the only thing a boy of 10 years could do. I dropped to my knees and cried. I cried for a long time, holding my lost horn, not knowing what to do until I heard his voice.
What's the matter, Daddy, and what?
I looked up to see a big human man in dark robes with a black beard and a black wide head. He smiled down at me.
You seem to be having a bad night, Daddy.
I told the dark stranger my story. He just seemed to listen intently.
That's a sad story, Daddy, and what? Seems you ain't got a friend in the world, dear.
I nodded as I sobbed, and not knowing the deal I was about to make. The dark stranger smiled.
I know who you need to talk to, Daddy, and what?
The dark stranger led me through the swamp. I didn't know where we were going until I heard beautiful yet sad music that I had never heard before.
What is that? That, my boy, is your destiny, dear.
I was excited to hear that. We got closer to the source of the music. And a man, a lizard man, surprised me, was playing a harmonica. He stopped playing his instrument and smiled at me, which was very unnerving to see. A lizard smile. He extended his hand to me. Hello, boy. My name is Saxel. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. I looked at the dark stranger and asked him about this Saxel.
Sir, who is...
But he was gone. I think he served his purpose. I think Saxel was right, because I never saw the dark stranger again. Saxel was interesting. Let's say Daddy. He taught me how to hunt in the swamp and how to gather non-poisonous plants to eat. He was really good at it, although I never saw him eat or drink anything. I thought he was strange. Most importantly, he taught me music. Saxel had taken my lost horn and helped me turn it into an instrument that I named as saxophone. I had asked him what kind of music he played. He said he never named it, but it always made him a bit sad. He said it gave him the blues, and since I'm blue, he thought he would name the genre after me. I felt honored, at least at that time. One day, Saxel and I were having, what do you call it, jam session. Saxel looked at me. That's some mighty fine playing, boy.
Thanks, sir. I learned it from you.
He gave me that unsettling smile. I think it's time to play in front of an audience. I was shocked.
Really? That's amazing. Where?
Tomorrow night, it's a Norman town called All Town. I was excited to finally have an audience. Excited, terrified. We arrived at a fairly ritzy inn, and it was packed. I peeked at everyone behind the curtain of the stage. Saxel was behind me. You're gonna knock him dead, kid. I was nervous. I looked to Saxel in confusion.
Well, I have nothing prepared. What am I gonna do?
Don't worry, boy. Whatever you do, they'll eat it up. I know I will. I didn't know why at the time, but Saxon made me more nervous. I made my way on stage. Everyone quieted down. The crowd stared at me in silence, so I decided to fight through my fear and start playing my saxophone. I thought about my life. I thought about my mama. I thought about my daddy. I thought about losing my horn. I thought about living in the swamps. I put all those memories in my saxophone. The crowd watched it all. It was amazing until something started coming out of the mouths. At first, I thought it was smoke, but it had no smell. However, it had faces. The smoke made its way into Saxon's mouth. I stared at him in confusion and horror.
What are you doing?
My horror grew as Saxon began to change. Large bat-like rings ripped through its skin. His green scales became red, and he grew in height. His face flattened out with large tusk-like teeth protruding from his mouth. He was no longer a lizard man. He was a demon.
Saxon, what is this?
There's a feeding time, boy. I looked out into the crowd. All that were left were dry husks that used to be people. I looked back in Saxon rage.
What did you have me do?
He turned his bright, red, glowing eyes to me, with a sickening sneer on his face. I had you pay your debt, boy.
My debt?
That's right, boy. You think that helping you survive building your instrument, teaching your music was free? Oh, no. There's a price for everything, boy. I shook with horror at what Saxon was, what I had done.
Is my debt paid?
Oh, my boy. You ain't even close. I didn't know how to escape my fate.
It was a fascinating tale, although I was a bit bothered that he didn't tell me what happened to the demon. As we traveled through Brogue, I figured he'd tell me.